Hi friends, this is your pal Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and we're going to talk about what you don't talk about. All right, so the reason why we're going to do that is I recently have started listening to YouTube retirees, right? Retirees who start YouTube channel. It's pretty cool. It's interesting. Now, I'm 55 years old, so I'm probably, I'm at least a decade away from retirement. And it's probably, probably like more like 15 years, right? But and if you believe some people, there will, like some people would say, "Oh, you ain't never gonna retire," and there is some argument for that, which is interesting. So, but YouTube is really fascinating in that I really love to see how YouTube will give anybody who wants it a global platform. It's not easy. It definitely has its own risks, but but if you want a global platform, you can have it for free. And there's a formula to it. Oh, and what's that formula, Scott? Dude, I can tell you right now. If you want a global platform, if you want people to listen to you, you can have a global platform. You can have for all people from all over the world to do it. I'll give you the formula right now. 5 days a week, twice a day. Do a video twice a day. And then, how do you do that? I'm not going to answer that in this video. But if you do that and you don't stop, you will have a global platform. And I'm proof of it. Like, and many other people are proof of it. And I didn't come up with that. Someone else who does YouTube, actually, I've outlasted them. But somebody who I've outlasted taught me that. But they use the same thing to get a global platform. And arguably, they still have that global platform. It's kind of interesting. But I have listened to some retirees. So I listened to I think about two or three of them. I'll listen to them every now and then. I don't listen to all their content, but I listen to them every now and then. And this one guy did a fantastic video, and he said what you should never talk to people about. And I wanted to talk about his list in context of Dungeons and Dragons. All right, so let's take a look at his list. Here's what he said you should never talk to people about. Resentments, regrets. It's RRPPF. All right. Regrets, resentments, plans, pains, and finances. And I was like, whoa, that is a really good list. So first of all, was he right? Yes, absolutely. That is a fantastic list. It is such a good list. And the ramifications of it are really significant. One of the things that really fascinates me. So one of the things that fascinates me is once I found Dungeons and Dragons, I just found I found beyond humans, right? Like just people who are like, they're beyond human, right? Like Gary Gygax was like, I'm going to completely change how humans interact with narrative and identity. And people who do Dungeons and Dragons, they are beyond human in that when you talk, a good example, a good friend of mine introduced me to the UFC, Universal Fighting Championship. And, and I've watched probably 100 bouts now, easily, right? I've been doing it for 5 years. I'm very knowledgeable of the UFC, and I've seen literally over 100 bouts. I've even seen bare knuckle boxing, which is like, whoa, right? But once you see UFC, you absolutely can never watch a regular boxing match again. These guys have pads on they have pads on their fists, and they just walk around punching each other. Like, are you kidding me? I've watched dudes, go on the ground. I've watched dudes sever, like, crack femurs in half. Like, it just like, I've seen people, do, flying roundhouse kicks. Like, I've seen people, just like elbow. Do you know what an elbow to the face means? Like, like once you see UFC, you just can't do regular boxing. It looks so like, it looks like strawberry shortcake land. It's just the most ridiculous nonsense, right? And I think UFC, like, who's the heavyweight champion in the world? When I grew up, every person, if you walk down any main street in America and said, who's the heavyweight champion of the world in boxing, you couldn't get three people in before that money was taken. Today, you could go all the way down Wall Street. Nobody could give you an answer. You'd keep your money at the end, right? So, like, it's pretty amazing. Like, it's really incredible, right? And UFC is, and it's the same thing with humans, right? Like once you talk to a dungeon master, a dragon master, talking to a bog standard muggle human is so painful, right? And the reason why is they break these rules constantly, right? The biggest one is pains. Like it's interesting because when you talk to a dragon master or a dungeon master, first of all, they don't have to talk to you about themselves. They can talk to you about the most interesting thing about all the worlds that their heart has beat on, right? They can talk to you about, one of 30 identities and the emotions, the thoughts, the memories, the experiences of any of those people, right? Not just themselves, right? And they're just much deeper. They don't function like a normal human being. Normal human beings are outrageously boring to talk to. And they break these rules constantly. The biggest one, it's just like it's a simple little list, right? But there are entire people who go their entire lives not understanding this list, right? So the first one is there are people who actually believe that talking to you about their pains is interesting for you. It's not, right? Nobody wants to hear your pains. Nobody wants to hear your health issues. Nobody wants to hear your pains on your emotional level, your physical level, or your spiritual level. Nobody wants to hear it, right? They have their own, right? They want to hear something interesting. They want to hear something delightful. They want to hear something dramatic. They want to hear something dynamic. They don't want to hear your pains. They really don't. And it's shocking how many people do not understand this, right? And go through their entire lives just dumping on other people. What's very interesting, though, is a lot of people get away with it. People can get away with it for a lot of reasons. One, you can break this rule if you find a reason why somebody would possibly do you a favor all the time. And there are humans who get this, right? One of them is just physical attractiveness, right? Like there are a lot of guys who are like, oh, you're a physically attractive, there's a lot of people where, oh, you're a physically attractive person. I'll forget the idea that I don't want to hear a single word you have to say, and I'll just bask in your presence. And that's one way that people either get away with not understanding or even understand that nobody wants to hear this and then get away with it. I think that's really fascinating. So regrets, resentments, plans, and pains. Plans. Man, this one was brilliant. Oh, what are you going to do? Nobody cares what you're going to do, right? It's just talking until you do it, right? And you shouldn't spend 1 minute talking about what you're going to do. You should do it, right? And that's another reason why I absolutely despise session 0, right? Nobody wants to hear your plans, right? Just do it. Spend your time doing rather than talking about what you're going to do, right? And it doesn't mean you don't plan. It just means you don't waste anyone's time with your plans, right? And once you do it, it becomes a story of failure or a story of success. And that is interesting, right? I did this, it failed. I did this, it succeeded. That's interesting. Plans are nothing, right? Your resentments and your regrets. Nobody cares, right? And then last, your finances. That's a very smart one. There's a lot of good reasons not to talk about your finances. It's a fantastic list, right? What's interesting is once you understand this list, right? Once you understand that this list exists and this is extremely real, right? That nobody wants to hear your regrets, your resentments, your plans, your pains, your finances. One, Dungeons and Dragons can then be extremely helpful. And I think one of the reasons why is it gives us a way to break this rule, right? In a winsome way, in a way that's interesting. One, nobody wants to hear your plans, but you can plan and you can execute plans risk-free in Dungeons and Dragons, right? It's something you can do at the table, which is fascinating, right? Because you can make a plan and then you could execute a plan in a Dungeons and Dragons game and see how it goes, right? And use somebody else's thought processes in a way to test those plans, but in a way that they'd be thrilled to do it. Many people love to Dungeon Master. Many people love to Dragon Master. And so you running through your plans, right? It doesn't cause an issue. The other thing is pains, right? Nobody wants to hear about your pains. But what if they're not yours? What if they're a fascinating non-player character? What if they are the pains of a fascinating player character? What if they are pains that someone you have is experiencing, but then you put them on yourself as a player with a player character, right? And then you experience them. That is fascinating, right? That is a way to subvert the rules, right? To actually talk about pains, but not directly through a remove. The most valuable thing about Dungeons and Dragons is the power of this remove. It is so powerful and so valuable. It is absolutely fascinating. And I really think it's really cool and awesome and really unique. It's a powerful thing. Regrets and resentments. And actually, that's another one. Like, can you talk, like, one of the things is you could even process these, right? Like your regrets, right? You could find a path in life where you don't take that regret, where you actually execute in the other direction because you know better based on time, and experience life without those regrets in a Dungeons and Dragons game. Resentments. What if you have resentments, but you want to work past them? Again, the life modeling in Dungeons and Dragons can help you to find a way to move past these resentments, right? To process them. So I thought this was absolutely brilliant list. I think it's absolutely true. Nobody wants to hear about your regrets, your resentments, your pains, your plans, and your finances. And so many people don't understand this basic law, right? That when you enter into a conversation with another human being, you have a social burden to uphold your end, right? And upholding your end is not talking about these things and talking about other things. Now, before we even move into Dungeons & Dragons, one, if you just realize that this list is good and you shouldn't do it, you will immediately become a blessing to people in your conversation rather than a burden, right? Then in addition to that, from the Dungeons & Dragons perspective, there's a million ways to break the rule here, but do it in a winsome way, or to process these things in a different way that can be useful or beneficial. Every single word you just heard is my humble opinion. Nothing more, nothing less. The important part is when I get to hear your humble opinion when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a fetch millennium.